My name is Michael Bennett. I come from Ireland originally. I've spent most of my adult life in Africa. I'm a priest, I'm a Catholic priest. I'm a member of missionary priests who are found in different African countries and South America as well. And I'm here, currently I'm here in a township outside Johannesburg. I'm getting on in life, but that's fine. Life is to be lived at every age, in your 70s included. When I finished school, I had no intention of being a priest. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I got a job at that. I got 2 or 3 jobs at that time. I could have a choice of jobs. Anyway, I was working in a bank. We were trained to work in the bank, etc. I was very young. I was 18, 17, 18, 19. Like any young person, friends, going to parties, going to dances, girls around, the usual stuff. Even had my own car, second-hand. I bought it very cheaply. On the outside, it looked great. It was blue and white. It was a two-tone Ford Anglia, but it was two-tone. On the outside, it looked great, but inside, you'd take the mat off the floor, and there was a hole in the floorboard. So, and sometimes it would break down, but there'd be a few of us together. We'd get out and push it. So we're always on the move and playing football as well. And yeah, it was a lot. But there was something else going on in me at the same time. I couldn't put my handle on it. I came from a Catholic family, all right, and I went to Mass every Sunday. I was faithful to Mass, and I think I prayed every day as well. Short prayers, nothing sensational, certainly not. But I love life, as a young person, but something more. The more was what was inside me, and it wasn't coming. It was coming from outside of me, but it was affecting me within. And I wished it would. I still remember. It was January the 1st, New Year's Day, probably 1969, I'd say. And I was still working in the bank at that time. I remember waking up that morning, New Year's morning, and saying to myself, "Look, Lord, leave me alone," sort of. No, that's not the exact words, but that was my feeling. Leave me alone. Why are you troubling me? Why are you kind of getting at me? I'm happy as I am. I wish this would go away, whatever it was. I said, look, I better see what this is all about in some way, because I was feeling some kind of inner calling to priesthood, really, yeah. But to a more missionary priesthood, working outside of my own country. And it wouldn't go away, and I wished it would. It wouldn't go away, and I wished it would, and it stayed with me. So I remember then at that point during the year, I went to a couple of places and I talked with, there would have been the vocations directors, yes, that's who they were, for 2 different missionary societies in Ireland. And I ended up that year in probably August, I would say, leaving my job in the bank, knowing, I got leave of absence for 1 year. In other words, I could return after a year if it didn't work out in the seminary, the seminary training, if it didn't work out. So I took my year's leave of absence. That was probably August 1969. Now it's how many years later? It's 50 years later, more than 50 years later. And I never went back to the bank. So, and that was the end of my banking career. I could have been a CEO and simply a banker if I'd stayed on, full of money and full of titles and all the rest. But that meant nothing to me. So as I went on, I went through my years of formation. I spent 8 years preparing to be a priest, and my service I was in Kenya for 11 years, 77. I was ordained in 1977 until 88. I could have spent all my life in Kenya. I loved it. I was young, enthusiastic. So I was living out your situation in different situations: East Africa, Kenya, West Africa, Cameroon, Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Oh, each place is different. And, African people are great, basically. And I'm still learning. As I said, I'm a learner in life's journey, and as well as being a spiritual seeker, I'm a learner, and I've learned a lot from African people, but they still don't understand their culture. But I think I've learned a little bit about African culture over the last 40 years, or 40 years plus. So yeah, I'm still learning. That's important in any vocation, to be a learner. Once you stop learning, you stop living. Yeah. I remember when my father died in 1975, I was a student priest, 27 years of age or so, and yeah, it struck me, and it hit me quite hard. It happened quite quickly and took me aback, and I won't go into it, but the death of my mother perhaps was even more traumatic because I'd known her for much longer, 52 years. She died in 2001. I was born in 49, and I was very close to my mother because I knew her for much longer than my father. And when she died, I missed her a lot. And I left Kenya in 1988, and just at that time, there was a lot of what came to be called ethnic cleansing. It was just beginning. I was living in the Rift Valley of Kenya, and some of the scenes I saw there at that time were very traumatic, and again had quite an effect upon me. It was more the struggles and the suffering of local people rather than myself. But I saw, for example, one incident in particular when a village very near where I was staying in a place called Eldama Ravine. This is about 1988, I think. And there were the local police, army, whatever. They were told to, obviously they got orders to remove people who had been squatting in the forest. Now, okay, you could argue, should they be squatting in the forest? I won't go into that, but there were Kikuyu people who were squatting in the forest, and they were poor people. But I saw villages being burned down, huts, thatched roofs, huts being burned down, people fleeing carrying their little bits and pieces in their donkeys, trying to escape the carnage, if you like. And we did our best to help them. I had a 1-ton pickup, and sure, we were ferrying people, and it was my first real encounter with very, very harsh conditions, and perhaps could I use the word of repression and brutal repression, perhaps, the way things worked out. And I tried to take a stand. There were 2 or 3 priests at that time in that area, and we engaged with the local authorities, etc. And at the same time, we tried to help the people who had lost their homes. But that left an effect upon me. It had quite an effect. In 2005, in Zimbabwe, I was in Mutare, Zimbabwe at that time, and it was after an election, presidential election. Mr. Mugabe had been re-elected, and again he was really elected as president of the rural Zimbabwe, because rural Zimbabwe supported him at the polls, and there's a lot of skullduggery going on. Anyway, the urban people really didn't vote for Mr. Mugabe. That was always the pattern. And so after the 2005 election, that was it, there was a so-called cleanup. In Shona, they called it Maramba China. In other words, Marambas to get rid of the dirt, China, dirt. So supposedly it was an operation to clean up the cities from squatters and from shanty towns and drug dealers and addicts and all the rest, and prostitutes. But in reality, it was an effort to clean out a lot of the urban people living in very poor township conditions, get them to go back to the country areas where originally they came from, so that there could be political control over them from the local chiefs and elders, etc. But the whole operation was horrible. I was very angry at that time. And again, similar to Kenya, but perhaps on a much larger scale, And I used to go out in the morning, and I remember it was winter time, actually. It was June, I think, June 2005. And you'd see the people huddled in corners. I remember there was a group of, there were blind people just out in the open air. Maybe we used to give them blankets and that and food, all of that. But there they were, and so many people like that. There were children who were coming up to me and say, "Father, we've been pierced by nails." That sounds strange, but their shacks were knocked down. Sometimes they knocked them down themselves because others would have knocked them down. The authorities would have knocked them down otherwise. They get pierced by nails and bringing them to the doctors and clinics, and they're trying to get them, doctors and clinics really working, trying to get them some kind of treatment. And there were hungry people, and there were people in the cold. It was really a callous operation. And again, we tried to deal with the authorities and try to organize transport for them. After that occasion, there was a meeting of local NGOs and political people, and I was actually asked to act as the chairperson of this meeting. And there was the UN advisor, there was the UN delegate who was in the area. Who was appointed to deal with this issue in some way from the perspective of the United Nations. But I made every huge effort to make sure that the story came out and that people described what was going on in the face of the politicians who were there so that they would hear the full story. And of course, they were trying to deny it. I remember another meeting was at that time, and there was a lot of the NGO people were there and local people who were kind of, I was a priest and had a certain freedom, didn't worry me too much what happened to me. I didn't have a wife and children, all of that. But others were watching their backs, and they were kind of very timid in their response. And I remember, I still remember, what did I say at that meeting? I said, this is abominable. Of course, there was dead silence. And I kept saying why this whole operation had been abominable, this clean out of the poor from the urban areas. And they were sort of taken aback that I could be so forward. People are still struggling. This is 17 years later, and people are still feeling the after effects of what happened then and the legacy of that time. I said to you already that I'm 73 years of age. If I was 37 the other way around, or even 27, or even 17, I probably, if you asked me the question, well, am I happy? I would probably say, well, yeah, I'm happy because I love being with my friends. I'm happy when I'm playing football. As a young person, I used to play a lot of football at a fairly decent level, happy having fun, whatever. But I'm not 37. I'm now 73. So my perception on happiness probably, it has changed dramatically. The Gospel of the Beatitudes, and it talks about blessed are the poor spirit, blessed are the meek. It uses the word blessed. Some translations have the word happy. Exceedingly happy or blessed. Blessed is probably a better word. So while being happy is really, it's a feeling word. For now, I feel happy, but maybe tomorrow I'm not happy. Being blessed is more to do with one's standing before God, before life, before truth, before meaning. And that's, if you ask me the question, am I happy? I would say, I wish to be blessed. I wish to stand before life, before truth, before meaning, before God, and live out a life of meaning and truth. And that is where I will find my contentment. If you ask me, am I happy? I probably would be happier to be in my own country, my own people, in Ireland, rather than in South Africa. But that's not the issue. The issue is my standing, as I said before, life and truth and meaning and fullness and all of that. Just supposedly I'm taken out of here in the morning and I'm accused of doing something in the wrong, and I end up in prison. But because I feel and I believe that I am just in what I have done, even though I'm in prison, I can still be blessed. Happy is not a strong enough word in that context. In that sense, if I take it at the language you use, am I happy? Well, what brings meaning in standing before God. I have a lot of time for younger people, and I find great energy in that. And in working with younger people, I've done a lot of that over the years. And there is the opportunity to discover the fullness of life, to help younger people, to engage with them so that they will discover the fullness of life. And as a consequence of bringing life to others, I discover life myself. Because where there is life, there is love, there is truth, there is fullness of life and hope and truth. All of that is that's where one stands before God and before life itself. And I suppose we only have one life. We don't have a second life. One opportunity, one period of 70, 80 years, whatever it is, less for some. And I do believe it's worth making the most out of that one life that we have. We don't have a second life. There's no second chance. So to live life to the full, isn't that the gospel invitation? I came that you may have life and live it to the full. I try to use, I think it's important to use your time creatively. That's one thing I would say. And because time is, I believe, is precious. Not in the sense that, well, I must be using my time to achieve more, to be more successful, to make more money. That's not my agenda. To use it in a creative, life-giving way, to use one's time. So it might be more aware of stuff, maybe reading stuff, trying to understand something better, trying to respond to issues or to people, or, as I said, online, trying to use my time creatively, trying to write a bit. There's no material reward from it. I don't get paid for it. I don't want. That's not my interest. But it's life is more than life is about. Being creative, being life-giving, bringing energy, inspiring. The word inspiration, inspira, the Greek word, the Latin word is to give spirit to others. That's what it means. To inspire, to create new spirit in people's lives where spirits are down or depressed or broken indeed. Can I be a person who gives spirit, inspire others through what you say, through what I do, through what you say, through what you do. We're called to inspire each other, to be inspiring, being a person who inspires and gives life and energy and hope where energy and hope is lacking, where maybe there is a sense of despair, loss, rejection that people experience. Can you bring a message of hope, be a person of hope in what you say, even the smile in your face, even your handshake, even your presence to people, which might even be a silent presence. Someone has lost a loved one, or someone has suffered through rejection or accident or something. Just being there, being a presence, a life-giving presence. There are a lot of people who are living life at a very surface level. There is a lot of what I would call ego stuff going on. It's all, I'm not saying it's bad, but there's a small life, I think, that people are involved in. Very much concerned in me. My success, my power, my privilege, my status, often at the exclusion of others. So life can become very much a rat race to succeed. It can become a pressure situation, probably because they're living a life that is very confined, disconnected from something deeper within. Certainly a major passion at this point is to enable people to travel on the road to personal integration. Well, that sounds a bit strange, that language, forgive me, but it means a lot to me, that language, personal integration. It's really an inside job. If you want to live life to the full, you have to live it from within. I think this is what Jesus was trying to get people to do, to discover a deeper self, to discover and to let go of a lot of the blockages that were in their lives. I'm passionate about helping people, whether it's individuals or groups, whether it's probably in one-to-one or maybe one with a smaller group. I would love to see more people living from inside out, or at least getting a greater handle on the inner life, which includes an awful lot of things, including prayer, including a relationship with God, which is expressed in different ways, which is nurtured through sacraments, etc., the Eucharist, all of that. And getting a handle on that, and because you have that relationship with God, which ultimately it's discovering our true self, which, as St. Paul says, is hidden with Christ in God. Then, when there's that inner connection, the outer self, the integration can take place. Inner and outer somehow are coming together in a better way. There is personal integration, and life becomes infinitely better, infinitely real, infinitely more true. We come to discover our true self. We're not as upset as we were before. There's a certain calm and balance in our lives that was lacking. And there is a joy. There is a blessedness that I spoke about because we know something deeper and because there is connection and because we are real and because we are true. One of the things I often remember was, I mentioned the word charity. My mother had extraordinary compassion for the poor in society. I do remember when growing up in Ireland, in our small town in the 1950s, I was just a small boy. But the poorer people, it wasn't the Ireland of the 2010s or the 2020s. Today, it was an Ireland that a lot of people weren't very well off at that time, and there were a lot of poor people around. And in our street, it seemed that the poorer people would make a beeline to our door, especially one or two families. I remember they used to come every couple of weeks, and I've literally seen my mother taking a piece of meat or potatoes or vegetables from her own plate, putting it into a little container, plus other food, plus whatever, going to the door and giving it to a poor family. And I saw that as a small child, and I didn't fully understand it, but I knew there was great compassion. I could sense it perhaps rather than articulate it, but it had, I would say, a profound impact on me. So if I have had in my life any bit of a heart for struggling people, I think I can credit my mother with that rather than myself. So yeah, she was a wonderful woman in so many ways. She was a woman of charity, faith, love, trust, all the values that you can think about. She was a woman of great faith. She went to Mass every morning, believe it or not. She did, yes. And the Eucharist was very central to her life. And prayer, personal prayer, family prayer, all of that was so important. I'm really a member of two families. There is my biological family, which is limited at the moment because I just have my sister in Ireland, but I've have a lot of extended family members, etc., and a lot of friends whom I grew up with. And when I go on holidays, I'm very much in contact with them. So there is that sort of biological, cultural family, if you like. I mentioned already that when I was young, I used to play a lot of football, and those people the young people I played football with are now my age or younger or older, even some of them, and we still have contacts, and it's wonderful. That's one family. The other family then is, if you like, my religious family. We're a group of, I think there's about 300 of us. So that family is there, and the younger members are there. I'm living here now with a young Kenyan priest, relatively young, early 40s. We communicate very well together, and he's a great, I hope I'm a support to him. I try to be anyway. And there are other members of our St. Patrick's family in this district here. There are 4 or 5 others. They're older people, and some younger members down in KwaZulu-Natal. So there's that aspect. So there are 2 families there. And then there are immediate neighbors. There's the Christian community and people whom I meet. This morning, for example, I love to get up in the morning and run and jog. But a week ago, would you believe it, I was bitten by 3 dogs. I was out jogging very early in the morning. I tried to keep them off, and I was lying on the road, actually. 2 of them bit me, Two of the dogs bit me, which is serious, and I knew that. Eventually, there's a couple of young men came along and they drove them off. But I'm just saying, the community, being involved in the community. I love to run and jog. This morning, I went to the park run, which I do when I'm free. But there are community activities. There's the local church body. There's members of the church, etc. The Christian community. Neighbours are important, and we all need special friends. That's the other point I think I mustn't forget. We need special friends. Special friends are hard to find. We all need, can I use the word intimacy in our lives? And we kind of will, on the journey of life, we probably will be intimate only with a handful of people. Intimacy means to be very close to someone, so that you can really let your guard down and open your heart and know that you will be trusted and you will be understood. And so neighbours, love of God and love of neighbours, not what it's about. And living out that vocation, I see it a bit like the cross, the love of God at the vertical axis and love of neighbour is the cross. You can distinguish between them, but you cannot separate them. Just as you can't separate the two parts of the cross. And to love your God and to love neighbour does require a lot of self-giving. And, because neighbours can be demanding at times as well, and they can be troublesome even. But look, neighbours are good and we need them. At a personal level, when I was younger, saying prayers and being taught how to say prayers and even saying the breviary, which is the prayer of the church, all of that, and saying the Psalms. And of course there's community prayer, there's the prayer of the Mass, which is so central, wonderful prayer of the Eucharist, all of that. But maybe at a more personal, one-to-one level, personal prayer in that sense. God and I, or God and the individual. 7 or 8 years ago, I had, I would say, a very profound moment of grace, I believe, yeah. I just discovered within myself over a period of time a very great desire for silence, silent prayer, almost as if my words were too many in my prayer and I needed just to be silent and empty and to move into a different space, a space of silence and emptiness before God. And I think for the last 7 or 8 years I've been maybe trying to pray in that way. Just prayer is being present to God. My task is to be there before Him. God's task is to change me. I'm not aware of it, and I don't want to be aware of it, and the less aware of it, the better. I say that in as humble a way as I can, but prayer is about God. It's not about me. It's not about the individual. I think the great danger for me or for anyone is that we can be seeking the consolations that come from prayer rather than seeking God. But the one who really teaches us about prayer is God Himself. He's the one who teaches us about prayer. Teach us how to pray, is what the disciples asked Jesus. Teach us in the Our Father. I'm sure that Jesus Himself, we're told that He goes up on the mountain to pray, He spends all night in prayer, whatever, certainly a considerable period of time every day. He was contemplative in so many ways. What does it mean to contemplate, to gaze upon reality, to gaze at the great mystery of God? God is vast and majestic, as well as being so personal and close, but He's also extraordinary, awesome. That's a word they use in South Africa a lot, in a very loose way, I think, to say, oh, everything is, food is awesome, your car is awesome, but awesome has a different meaning, something that's worthy of awe, a mystery that's worthy of awe. God is awesome. That's the deepest meaning. And it's like standing on the edge of an abyss. Awesome, something that's awesome, something that's without bottom, the bottomless reality of God. And we stand on the verge, and I just feel, at times I feel very so inadequate in prayer, just like dancing on the verge of that great abyss in front of you. I'm feeling quite empty and quite inadequate, and I think that's fine. So just to be there before God. So how do I pray? I try to pray twice a day. Try to be faithful. I think prayer requires consistency. It's easy to say, oh, I'm tired, and I won't pray now. We'll make a lot of excuses, but if something is really important in your life, it'll be a priority for you. And if personal prayer isn't a priority, then forget about it. Maybe it's very superficial, your prayer. You're looking just for a feel-good factor or consolations of prayer without seeking God himself and yourself insofar as you can be empty before God, for the great majesty of God and the infinity of God. But also God is infinitely close, as well as infinitely majestic. He's infinitely close. He's Father, and you are a child, and you are loved. And it's a relationship of love, ultimately. And we shouldn't fear to enter into that relationship. Jesus is our brother. He invites us into that relationship. He gives us His Spirit. The Spirit teaches us how to pray. And so for me, as I say, that silent prayer, that centering prayer, centered in God, and praying from one's own deepest self, deepest center, and just being silent, just trying to be silent. Okay, there's a lot of distraction, a lot of thoughts come into mind, but it's a bit like a mountain. A mountain, there is clouds come and they come and go, but then maybe the mountain is hidden from the clouds, but it's still behind the clouds. Similar, when you pray, God is there. The thoughts, the distractions, they come and go, but you can meet them with a certain level of stillness. Being still, be still and know that I am God. And somehow the less you know, instead of after a period of prayer, say, well, how did I pray? Was that good or was it bad? It's not about that. No, it's not. In fact, the so-called bad period of prayer, when you have no consolation, etc., might be your best period. Bad in inverted commas, might be your best period. It's not about you knowing, it's in the not knowing, it's in the not being in control. It's in the letting go. The letting go to God. That's where God can work. And as I say, in my later years, that's the sort of prayer pattern that I moved into in the last 8 years, 9 years, whatever. And I see that as God's grace. And I humbly, as a spiritual seeker, I humbly try to be open to that, to being touched and being enabled by God in that experience. And let it be, without knowing where it's leading me. I don't want to know, and I don't think I should know, or anyone in that position. God knows. As I say, prayer is about God. It's not about me. You. All right, these are some of the things that come immediately to mind. This is very spontaneous, I must say. My response is very spontaneous. So, yeah.
Thank you, Father.
All right.